narration of Luke 15:11-32. Jesus, Reverend Janet.
There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that would belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in desolate living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said,
"How many of my father's hired hands brought enough and to spare? Here I am dying of hunger. I'll get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.'
So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him,
Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son."
But the father said to his slaves,
Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he's found.
and they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field. And when he came in and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked,
"What's going on here?"
The slave replied,
Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has brought him back safe and sound.
Then the elder son became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father,
"Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I've never disobeyed your command. Yet you've never given me even a young goat, so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured his property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for me."
Then the father said to him,
Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost, and now has been found.
the gospel of Christ.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Prodigal God, open our hearts to prodigal thoughts. Amen. One Palm Sunday, a couple years ago, I realized as I faced the congregation to bless and distribute the palms at the foot of the chancel steps, that I had not brought forward the basket of palm crosses. So I called the youth server behind me to bring me the palms. I finished my prayer and still no palms. But I noticed the congregation in front of me started to smile and chuckle. So I turned around, and there was little Natalie, struggling, swaying sideways, almost toppling over, as she slowly struggled to bring me the massive potted palm tree placed near the sanctuary. Her efforts were prodigal in that she indeed was bringing me palms of an extravagantly lavish scale. The word prodigal refers to excessive efforts, generous or unstinty, unsparingly or reckless, bounteously, spending or outpouring to excess proportions, either our resources or our lives. For example, I might say Sharon Stewart's delicious cake is wonderful, and the amount of blueberries she piled on top this time was prodigal. For the young prodigal son, it was his excessive and reckless spending of his father's inheritance that earned him the title prodigal. Yet the word equally applies to the prodigal God and Father, who poured forth with unmeasured profusion his wealth, his love, forgiveness upon his younger son. This love was so excessive and beyond any social boundaries, it was considered by Jesus' listeners, in particular the respectable, good, law-abiding folk, as reckless and irresponsible on the father's part. This attitude is shared by the older son, who's very upset at his father's prodigal extremes to welcome his wayward son home. And such grace was not merited by the young son, which then raises the question of the place of the good son's resentment and refusal to join in the homecoming party for his younger brother. There is nothing prodigal about his stance, even as we understand it, and probably we've been there ourselves, resenting how hard we work, obedient we are, yet maybe a fun-loving sibling or friend has the time of their lives and takes all the worry, the time and attention and resources of the family to manage. Grace Carol Bowman is a wonderful artist, and in 2018, her work, The Return of the Prodigal Son, was inspired by receiving a gift of gold last summer, and she began to incorporate it in her paintings. So on a 48 by 48-inch panel with red bowl as a surface, she floated fragile leaf water gilding. Random red lines showed between the leaf that would be incorporated into a final painting. At this point, she had no idea what this panel would evolve into, but when you see the finished painting in a moment, you will notice that the red lines form a red cross intersecting the two figures joined in an embrace. Well, she was reading the weekend edition of the Wall Street Journal when she found her muse. She tore out of the journal a photo of a female cancer patient. It was in a cancer drug ad, and there were large words, hope, written on it, and a loving kiss for someone needing hope. This was a powerful image for her of love, and she worked with it to create the painting with the original faces from the ad incorporated into the painting. And it was for her a narrative that God's grace and forgiveness are for both prodigal sons and daughters. The gold came through the figure of the father kissing his daughter on her forehead. Then, as the painting evolved, extending the father's face into the gold, and the ashen tones in the prodigal daughter's face, there was also green and wine paint in the father's robe, which actually are the colors of grace, being extended lavishly to the daughter. Now, in its completion, the gold is shimmering through the daughter. The prodigal, for me, in this painting, is the extravagant hope, tender, vulnerable love, and light that illuminates from two human beings who allow themselves to feel emotions that leave them raw and real in each other's presence and embrace, and communicate to us, in so doing, the very radiance of heaven's light as it intensifies in them, intensifying in us compassion, yearning, and prodigal grace for all that life asks of us to have courage for. Now, this parable is so well known. Now, the beauty of a really good parable, as in this case, is that it meets generations of listeners wherever they are. 1st century Palestine, 4th century Rome, 16th century Geneva, and 21st century St. Thomas. Now, everyone has, if you don't mind the word, a little bit of a weird family. A Simpsons poster, which my son was a huge fan of that famous cartoon family, gave me. It's still in my kitchen. And underneath this, what it says, you can see that havoc is breaking out amongst Simpsons. Homer, Bart, and Lisa are clearly fighting. And this is the quote: "Remember, as far as anyone knows, we are a nice, normal family. Everyone has at least thought about running away from home. And whether or not you happen to have, probably your sister or brother might have. Almost everyone knows what a pain a sibling can be, especially when there are only two of you, so that the good child, bad child thing hovers over you, no matter which one you happen to be at any given time. And for these reasons and more, the parable of the prodigal son stays young, no matter how old it is, giving all kinds of people all kinds of ways to make the story their own. Now, in 21st century St. Thomas, there's nothing remarkable about a young man or woman deciding to leave their parents' home, to have some space to figure out who they are, or to seek their fortune in the world, or to ask for money to do so. In our own family, it was my elder brother that ventured out in the 70s with his brown suede, long fringe jacket costing $300 at the time, knapsack and heart full of dreams, heading to Mexico, where his belongings were soon stolen, and eventually the phone call came, help was sent, and my brother came home. The younger son of today's parable did what our brothers and many youth are born to do, and they may have hurt their fathers and mothers in the process, but many parents understood, since they probably did the same thing themselves. Left home to marry someone their parents didn't fully approve of, get a job away from the family business or town, or just go out to see the world. My father left home for university and was the only child of 6 to do so. That made him prodigal in many ways. It was a lavish extravagance to study engineering for those several years, instead of working to make an income like his brothers and sister. The difference, some fathers might say, is their prodigal adventures made good, and their children's not always. Even still, all is not lost, because in place of worldly success, many sons and daughters that left home won wisdom, humility, and returning home, if it was their place for any willful hurt to ask for forgiveness, they often received it. The son who was dead came back to life, and though he still had many things to work out with his elder brother, he was restored to his family and to his father's love, sadder but wiser for all he had brought upon himself. So if you tell the parable in this way, it is indeed the parable of the prodigal love, a story about the vastness of a parent's love available to a child who returns home. And as we do to relationships that are part of our lives, whether it is a spouse, a family, a community like the church, or God, we're sometimes really overwhelmed, expecting very little, we may receive much. Now that is, as I said, a perfectly good story. And we see the parallel right here as we will momentarily come to our Father's table and receive the bread and wine, the blood, and the body of Christ, where divine grace exceeds all our reasoning. But then we have to realize this. In Mid-Eastern audience hearing it from Jesus' lips in the middle of the first century, when they hear this, they are thunderstruck. Now the world is largely agricultural, for one thing, and chances are 9 out of 10 Jesus' listeners were rural, farmers like the family in the parable. The land was their livelihood. They received it in trust from their ancestors, and they held it in trust for their children. There was no courthouse where they could record their claims to it. Those claims were kept in the memory of the community, where honor was everything. You break faith with the community or lose its respect, and your property lines might be forgotten just like that. And a great deal depended on being and having good neighbors. When you needed help getting your crops in before the rain came, or raising a barn, or having a baby, or digging a grave, you counted on the neighbors, the same way they counted on you. You traded a dozen of your chickens for one of their lambs, you invited them to your parties, and they invited you to theirs. If things worked out the way they were supposed to, then your children married their children, strengthening the kinship bonds between your clans and linking your farms together. In this world, the individual had little meaning apart from his or her family. Identity was conferred in the plural, not the singular. And those of you who have lived in the country might understand this. They might say Joanne and you, she's a Roland, And they know exactly what they mean by that. They might even say, she's the Roland's youngest girl, all set to marry that Helping boy. The other thing you need to know about the Middle East is a huge honor owed to the patriarch of a clan and the elaborate code of keeping the honor in place. Patriarchs did not run. Patriarchs did not leave their places at the heads of the tables when guests were present. Patriarchs did not plead with their children. They told their children what to do. Told in this kind of culture, today's parable becomes a parable, I hate to say it, of a dysfunctional family. A story about a weak patriarch with an absentee perhaps wife, or perhaps she has died, and 2 rebellious sons he seemed unable to control, who was willing to sacrifice his father, his honor, to keep his community together. Now, when the younger son asks for his share of the family property, he deals his father a double blow. He not only means to break up the estate, he also means to leave his father, who counts on both of his sons to care for him in his old age. If there is a mother upstairs listening from behind the bedroom door, she gets a double blow, because when her husband dies, everything she has goes straight to her sons. Losing one of them is like losing her kidney. She needs at least 2 to survive. But the younger son is not thinking about his mother or father, his family's honor, or his village. He's thinking about himself, what he needs, what he wants, who he hopes he may turn out to be. So, staying in relationship is not high on his list of priorities. Being his own person is, and getting out of town to find himself is. Whatever his reasons, he asks for his share of the family property, and the father responds to the double blow with the double turning of the cheek. He not only divides his own property between his sons, though he's still very much alive and it never happens till they die, he also allows his younger son to sell his share so that the boy can liquidate the assets and take them when he goes. Now that for sale sign is not up very long apparently, but long enough for everyone in town to see it. Now what kind of patriarch cannot prevent his son from carving up the family farm? Does the boy have no shame? What is a bag of money compared to land that has fed ancestors for generations? When people see the father in town, they don't know whether to shun him or feel sorry for him. Because they cannot decide, they probably stop inviting him to their parties, but he does not look like he's in the mood to party anyway. It is as if his son has died, and after a while people stop talking about whose fault it is. The father is still part of the community, and the community protects him. The only way that boy of his is ever going to step back inside that town is to come back 10 times richer than he left, with fabulous presents for every member of his family, and enough left over to buy back the farm. Then he will have to throw a banquet and invite the whole community, honoring them as extravagantly as he shamed them when he left. Of course, this doesn't happen. Instead, the younger son loses everything, and he loses it to Gentiles, Roman citizens, pig owners, complete strangers to the God of Israel. He might as well have used his birth certificate to light a fire to keep warm. So what he does is so reprehensible. Now, I don't know if you know this. In the Talmud, there's a ceremony to deal with it. It's called Getshah. You punish a Jewish boy who loses the family inheritance to Gentiles, and here's how it works. If he ever shows up in this village again, then the villagers fill a large earthenware jug with burned nuts and corn. They break it in front of the prodigal and shout his name out loud, pronouncing him cut off from his people. So he's vanished. I'm taking a little time with this because this is a big story. The prodigal's hope, apparently, is to reach his father before the village reaches him. He has his confession ready. He's returning to apply for a job as a hired hand on what is left of the family farm. If he can earn enough to pay back what is lost, then perhaps he can dodge that ceremony I spoke of. And once again, being in a relationship is not on the prodigal's list of priorities. He needs groceries and a dry roof. So he heads home, he rehearses the confession as he goes. He's ready to take the initiative, he's ready for lunch, but someone must have seen him coming and told his father, because his father is on the lookout for him and sees him while he's far off and filled with compassion. He does one of those things patriarchs never do. His father runs to his son, runs so that everyone can see his pale ankles. He runs so his robes get wedged between his legs and flutter out like an apron. He runs like, and I hate to have to say it, but this is of the time, he runs like a girl. Like a mother instead of a father. He runs and puts his arms around his son and kisses him right there on the road where everyone can see them. Do you know what Aristotle said, one of his great quotes? Great men never run in public. The father's floating of this advice may spring from affection, but it's also to protect. If the father can get to the son before the village does, then he can save his son from being cut off. Now here we get to things to ponder about us too. This reconciliation will cost the father his honor, his greatness in others' eyes. But that's a price he's willing to pay. The father who runs like a girl to greet his son before anyone can treat him like a hired hand. And then he turns to his slaves and tells them to bring the best robe in the house. Well, that'll be his robe. To put a ring on his finger, that's a signet family ring. And sandals on his feet. Only slaves go bare feet. Next, he orders the killing of the fatted calf. It's not a goat or a lamb or a dozen chickens, but the calf, which is the most expensive piece of meat you can ever have, and if you serve it, it is for a whole village. It's a feast to restore the family's honor as well as a feast to restore the family's son. It's a banquet of reconciliation for anyone who will come. That's what Jesus is trying to get to us with. He is saved by being restored to relationship with his father, his family, ideally and hopefully his brother, his clan and village, who are also saved by the father's willingness to be a really poor patriarch. The reconciliation of his community means more to him than his honor. Does reconciliation mean more to us than our honor, than being right? He's a good father, but he doesn't care if people see him as not a right father. His son's salvation cost him almost as much as his son's abandonment of him in the first place. Yet he never says a word about the price. So if there's anyone that deserves a happy ending, this is this man. But you and I know what happens. His other son shows up and hears the music and dancing and refuses to go into the household. Now I told you it was a dysfunctional family, so we could all be a little more comfortable and see little shades of some things we deal with too. Maybe the son is upset that he's not been asked to take his place at the door. But I don't think that's the problem. This son's problem is that no one asked him whether he wanted to be reconciled with his good-for-nothing brother. No one asked him how he felt about spending what was left of his inheritance, taking care of 3 people instead of 2, or being known as the prodigal's brother, or wearing the second best robe, since the best one is already taken. The elder son is a good son. He's done everything right, but he isn't about to sit down at the same table with his self-centered, sin-sick brother, who has caused his family so much grief. So the elder son refuses to come in the house, and we can't grasp what a terrible insult this is to the father in front of everyone. The only way for the father to save the evening is to stay right where he is at the head of the table, to try to ignore his elder's absence until his guests leave, and then go outside, and what he ought to do in that culture is scold the boy and punish him. But you already know this father, right? His honor means nothing to him where relationships are concerned. He will do anything to keep his family together. So he goes out to his good son the same way he went to his bad one. Not only running this time, because honestly he's worn out a little bit from his children, but he goes out to say to his son the things that his son needs to hear to soften and open his heart. Everything that I have is yours. But it's as if all they want is their father's stuff and not their father. And that challenges us too. Do we want each other? Or do we want stuff, material or emotional or otherwise, that we get? If they just would ask him, he would tell them that peace always involves a profound crisis of identity. You can't have peace and stay exactly who you are, or even who you want to be. Sometimes you have to make huge concessions. sacrifice things as concrete as fields that have been in the family forever, along with things as intangible as honor, greatness, rightness, and yes, even self-respect. Sometimes you have to run like a girl, say that, to protect your kin, even those who have done you irreparable harm. It's all a matter of priorities, and for this father, reunion is all that matters. Reunion finds the lost and brings them home. Reunion brings the dead back to life. So I want to close just by saying that with resettlement, we are kept from grace, from lavish love and joy, and from celebration and feasts with others. And what is the cost of resisting reconciliation? What I leave you with is this. Yes, God wants us to love God and to love Jesus as a good elder brother. But God so importantly wants us to love each other. And what each brother had to give the other would have helped them feel more of a whole. But because of the separation, they don't get the blessing of what that relationship could mean. The young brother still needs help to learn about discipline and commitment, and the older brother could help him with that. And the older brother needs to learn about risk and venturing forth, and the younger brother could share some of his dreams. So we close the parable knowing that Jesus told it to say, don't stop working on reconciliation. It's why I came into this world. And it is what being in this world is all about. Amen.